Hi Year 3, I hope you're doing well. Today we will be reading a book. It's called The Cat Who Got Carried Away by Allan Ahlberg. It is illustrated by Catherine McQueen. We will be reading chapters 1 to 3 today. Chapter 1, The Barking Pram. Early one evening, the Gaskets were at home, sitting side by side on Mr. and Mrs. Gasket's bed, all except Mrs. Gasket. She was in bed. Anyway, there they were, drinking tea, eating biscuits, and looking at the family photo album. There was a photo of Gus and Gloria as babies, a photo of Horus as a kitten, and a photo of Mr. and Mrs. Gasket dancing. On our honeymoon, said Mr. Gasket. But what about us? Were we born then? The children cried. Not quite, said Mrs. Gasket. We had the house to ourselves. Yes, Mr. Gasket smiled. It was delightful. Gloria punched him. I mean boring, and Gus hit him with a pillow. Boring, boring, boring. Meanwhile, Horus was outside, sitting on the garden wall, watching the world go by. He saw a boy on a bike, a boy on a skateboard, a woman in a car, and finally, on the other side of the road, a man absolutely whizzing along with a really old pram. And the strange thing was, which Horus noticed, the pram was barking. Woof woof. Chapter 2, Fried Egg and Pineapple. The next morning, everybody got up. Gus and Gloria got up and went to school. Mr. Gasket got up and went shopping. Mrs. Gasket got up, got the paper, got the post, got a cup of tea and a cream donut and went back to bed. Goodness me. Meanwhile, Horus was out on the wall again, hoping to see and hear that mysterious pram. Well, Horus never saw the pram that time, but Mr. Gasket did. He was in his car at the school crossing, and there it was, the same as before, with the same man just whizzing along, but not barking though. Oh no, it was more like squeaking, Mr. Gasket thought. When Gus and Gloria got to school, they found that something dreadful had happened. Randolph, clever, lovable Randolph, the class rat, had, squeak, squeak, disappeared. Oh yes, and Mrs. Fritter, while trying to find him, had fallen out of a window. The children, of course, were terribly upset. Poor Randolph, they cried. Poor Randolph, poor Randolph. Oh yes, and poor Mrs. Fritter. By this time, Mr. Gasket was in the supermarket filling his trolley. Horus was visiting a friend who seemed to be out. Mrs. Gasket was also out of bed. Hooray! She was downstairs now in the sitting room watching TV with a mug of hot chocolate and a fried egg and pineapple. Pineapple? Yes, pineapple sandwich. Meanwhile, somewhere not very far away, the pram was still whizzing along. So let's follow the pram, shall we? Here's a useful map. It shows where the pram has been so far this morning and where it's going. And here's a big white van with a ramp. Now the pram is being pushed into the van. Haha, what's going on here? And look, there's Horus on a wall again outside his friend's house. Horus is a smart cat. Well, Horus thinks he is. He's thinking now that if he sits here for a while, his friend will show up or something interesting might happen. It probably will. Chapter 3, Meet Mr. Cruncher. Back at school, Gus and Gloria and the other children were in the classroom whispering about Randolph. Poor Randolph, poor Randolph. And waiting for the supply teacher. Mrs. Fritter, nasty cuts and bruises, had gone home in a taxi. Suddenly, bang, the classroom door flew open, the windows rattled, the floor shook, and there he was. Very tall, very wide, with great big heavy bag, and his name was Mr. Cruncher. Mr. Cruncher was a PE teacher, a keep fit fiend. He had been in the army, he had been in the navy, he was a man of few words, and he loved running. Mr. Blagg, the headmaster, shook hands with Mr. Cruncher, and he wished he hadn't. Mr. Cruncher said, "Good morning, class," and the windows rattled again. After the lesson began, during the morning, Mr. Cruncher taught reading, writing, and running, but mostly running. There were obstacle races in the classroom, relay races in the hall, and laps on the school field. By lunchtime, Gus and Gloria and the others had forgotten Randolph and were puffing and gasping and sleeping even on the grass. Meanwhile, where's Horus? He was on that wall when we last saw him, wasn't he? But he's not there now. Meanwhile also, where's the pram? Well, it's still whizzing along. Look, down the road, round the corner, up the ramp and into the van. It seems a bit odd, that pram, doesn't it? Let's take a closer look. Let's see what sort of baby it's got in there. Let's see, closer, closer and closer. Oh no. Meow. They've got Horus. What do you think is going to happen next?